I invite you to listen to my new dramatic story about a military man's honor, betrayal, and just retribution on the Purple Heart Stories channel. I'm sure it won't disappoint you. And support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. The Test of Loyalty. Chapter 1, The Envelope. My name is Eric Shepard, 36 years old. 12 of them I gave to the elite Delta Force unit and things nobody talks about even under torture. Sophia is my wife, 32, an actress, the only person keeping me in this world. But there's a problem. There are photographs that shouldn't exist, and there are people playing games with death. And my Sophia found herself right in the center of this hell. I woke up exactly 17 seconds before the alarm went off, as I had done for the last 15 years of my life. My body knew the time better than any clock, a reflex developed over years when waking up late meant someone's death, usually mine. Without opening my eyes, I already knew Sophia wasn't beside me. The temperature of the sheets, the soundscape of the house, everything told me I was alone. She'd been gone for at least an hour. Her shoot started early, and I'd grown accustomed to waking up in an empty bed. My right hand automatically slid under the pillow, feeling for the Glock 19, compact, reliable, unfailing machine that had saved me more times than all the saints combined. Sophia hated weapons in the house, but this was our compromise. I didn't keep rifles in the closet. She didn't comment on the pistol under the pillow. Muscle memory, finger along the slide, not touching the trigger. Basic safety technique, ingrained deeper than breathing. 5:30. The alarm finally came to life, but I was already standing barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, preparing for a new day. A day that was supposed to be ordinary. My morning routine hadn't changed 6 days a week. 50 push-ups, 40 pull-ups on the doorframe bar, 100 crunches for abs. Cold shower, military standard, 3 minutes, no more. Sophia called it my obsession. Kitchen. Protein shake, 2 omega-3 capsules, black coffee without sugar, fuel for the body I trained like a machine. Everything strict, precise, according to schedule. Plates and cups arranged by size, knives sharpened to razor sharpness and stored with blades facing the same direction. Just discipline. While having breakfast, I scanned every corner of the kitchen for changes. Some would call it paranoia, I'd call it professional habit. Paranoia is when you see danger where there is none. 12 years in Delta Force taught me. Danger is always present, it's just not always obvious. The phone shattered the silence of the house with a sharp ring, not programmed in my contact list. External number, 7 digits after the area code. I picked up without saying a word. Eric, Sophia's voice sounded tense. I forgot my phone at home. I think I left it on the bedside table. Could you check? Sure, my voice sounded calm, although a switch flipped inside. Sophia never forgot her phone. In 3 years of marriage, it had never happened once. Thanks, love. I need to run to a meeting. I'll call you later. The connection broke before I could ask whose number she was calling from. The bedroom greeted me with the scent of her perfume, a subtle blend of vanilla and sandalwood. The phone was exactly where she said, on the bedside table next to a stack of books. My wife was an avid reader, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Vonnegut, an intellectual, the complete opposite of me with my technical manuals and military memoirs. I picked up the phone, and at that moment my hand brushed against the stack of books. They scattered like a house of cards, and a thick cream-colored envelope fell out from between the pages of The Great Gatsby. An envelope without a stamp, without inscriptions, sealed with an expensive paper seal bearing the initials AP. Ariadne Productions, the film company Sophia had recently started working with. I knew I shouldn't open it. Personal space, one of the unwritten laws of our marriage, but combat experience taught me, sometimes you have to break rules to survive. My fingers felt the contents without opening it. Thick paper, multiple sheets, possibly photographs. My heart beat heavier. With a quick motion, I tore the seal. Inside were glossy photos, professional high-quality studio lighting, and in each one Sophia, naked, with a man I'd never seen before. First frame, she's pressed against a wall, head thrown back, eyes closed in ecstasy. Second, on her knees before the stranger, his hand in her hair. Third, there on a bed, her body arched beneath him. Every detail, every curve of her body, every mole, all painfully familiar. And everything was happening with someone else. Between the photographs lay a note. Calligraphic handwriting, clearly not Sophia's. Sheraton Grand, room 714, tomorrow 9:00 p.m. Don't be late. I slowly sat down on the bed, still holding the pictures. A red haze stood before my eyes. The air in my lungs felt like concrete. The noise in my ears grew, like before a grenade detonation. Reason fought with instinct. Instinct screamed, "Find the bastard, gouge out his eyes, break every bone." But reason, the cold operator's mind that had saved my life countless times, whispered, "Analyze, observe, gather information." I felt two elements colliding within me. Rage, ancient as the world, demanding blood, and the icy calculation of an operator who knows emotions kill faster than any bullet. I couldn't believe it. Not Sophia. Not the woman who held me in her arms after nightmares when I woke up screaming, still feeling the sand of Kandahar, still hearing the death rattles of comrades. But photographs don't lie. They were as real as the gun under my pillow, as the scars on my body. I remembered our first meeting, a charity event for veterans. I came out of duty to fallen comrades, she as an invited artist. Sophia read Walt Whitman's poems about war, and her voice penetrated the armor I'd built up over years. With my gaze, I scanned the hall, noting all exits, all potential threats, everything except her. After the performance, I stood at the bar, a glass of bourbon seeming like the only warm spot in a cold world. She approached me herself. "It's hard to come back, isn't it?" she asked, looking me straight in the eyes so directly that I felt naked. "You don't know anything about this," I replied. "My brother didn't return from Fallujah," she said quietly, "so perhaps I know more than you think." 3 months later, we were married. Small ceremony, only the closest people. She was in a simple white dress. I was in a suit that was tight in the shoulders. We vowed eternal fidelity, and I believed every word she said. I placed the photographs on the bed and closed my eyes. Breathing, control, focus. Direct confrontation would be the simplest solution. Show the pictures, demand explanations, destroy everything with one blow. But I was trained differently. Gather intelligence, assess the situation, develop a strategy. I won't act blindly like a civilian. I'll find out what's going on before drawing conclusions. I carefully returned the photographs to the envelope, sealed it as best I could, and put it back between the pages of the book. Sophia's phone remained on the nightstand. Let her think I hadn't found it. Instead of calling her, I began preparing for surveillance. Surveillance is the art of disappearing, being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, seeing everything while remaining invisible. I wore inconspicuous clothes, gray pants, dark blue shirt, cap with a long visor hiding my face. All without logos, all without patterns, nothing that a casual witness might remember. In my pocket, a folding knife with a titanium blade, not for attack, for calming my nerves. I always thought better when I felt a weapon nearby. Sophia had been frequently visiting the Ariadne office in recent weeks. I knew her schedule. Today she was supposed to work until 6. A taxi dropped me off at a coffee shop across the street from the business center where the film studio was located. Perfect observation position. Through the glass wall, all entrances and exits from the building were visible. I ordered an Americano and sat by the window, opening a tablet with an e-book. Typical office worker on a break. Invisible. For 3 hours I was motionless, like a sniper in position. My eyes registered everyone entering and exiting, my brain automatically classifying people by threat level. No one paid attention to me. At 2:37 p.m. I noticed her. Sophia exited the building accompanied by a tall man in an expensive suit. They talked animatedly but not intimately. Professional distance. He said something, she laughed, with that same laugh I knew by heart. They parted. The man got into a black Mercedes, Sophia walked along the street. I waited 30 seconds and followed, keeping an optimal distance, close enough not to lose her, far enough not to be noticed. She entered a cafe, stayed there for 20 minutes lunch, judging by the bag with the establishment's logo she came out with. Then headed back to the office, but didn't enter it, instead stopping at the entrance, clearly waiting for someone. After 10 minutes, a taxi pulled up to her. I was ready. My taxi was waiting around the corner. The driver had already received double payment to follow the indicated car. Sophia's taxi headed downtown. Heavy traffic, but the driver didn't lose sight of it. Finally, the car stopped near a modern glass building with an Ariadne Productions sign on the facade. Not the main office, a branch or perhaps a studio. Sophia got out of the taxi and resolutely headed for the entrance. I ordered the driver to stop half a block from the building. Something wasn't adding up here. Why go to another office of the same company? The building didn't have open access. Security, turnstiles, pass scanning system. But I had connections. One phone call, and I was already talking to Mike, a former Special Forces operative, now working for a major security company. We went through survival training together at Camp McCall, pulled each other out of sand pits under the scorching sun. Such connections don't rust. "Eric, are you okay?" Mike's voice sounded wary. "I rarely use this number. I need access to the surveillance system in an office building." "Don't ask why," I said, looking at the entrance to Ariadne. Pause. "Address." I dictated it. "Give me 10 minutes," he said and hung up. Exactly 9 minutes and 40 seconds later, my phone beeped. A message with a temporary login and password to the surveillance system. I returned to the taxi and opened a secure application on my phone. The screen split into 6 parts, showing the main areas of the building: lobby, corridors, conference rooms. And there she was, Sophia. Conference room on the 3rd floor. She sat at a long table with a group of people. In the center of attention, a gray-haired man with the appearance of a university professor, surely the director. Next to him, a well-groomed type with a piercing gaze, clearly the producer. Several other people, technical staff, judging by their appearance. I scrolled through the cameras, trying to find the one that would give the best angle. The camera in the corner of the conference room provided a perfect view. The gray-haired man stood up and began saying something, pointing to the screen behind him. There was no sound, but from his gestures, I could tell he was discussing some project. Then he picked up a file folder and opened it. From the folder he took out photographs, the very same photographs I found in the envelope. He laid them on the table, periodically pointing out different details. A meeting, not a date. Work process, not infidelity. I felt something loosening in my chest. The knot that had been tightening with every minute after I saw the pictures began to slowly unravel. The director took the photographs and handed them to an assistant. Now he was looking directly at Sophia, saying something with an expression of sincere admiration. I switched to another camera that showed her face in close-up. A smile, not actress-like, real happy. She nodded, then stood up and shook the director's hand. The others present applauded. This was not infidelity. Sophia continued to smile, accepting congratulations from everyone present. The director hugged her paternally without a hint of anything more. The producer shook her hand formally but with obvious satisfaction. It was clear she had been given a role. I took a breath, feeling my head clearing. Of course, Sophia would never. What an idiot I was. I continued to observe the meeting. Everything started making sense. The photographs were part of screen tests for a role in an erotic thriller, staged scenes, acting work. Sophia is a professional actress. Of course, there would be such roles in her career. I should have trusted her. Doubts, suspicions, they were all an insult to our marriage. I was about to disconnect when I noticed a strange scene. The director's assistant, a young woman in glasses, said something, leaning towards Sophia. From my wife's facial expression, I understood that the news shocked her. She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes widened. I immediately switched to another camera that could capture the assistant face-on, hopping to read her lips. Lucia Garcia, accident on set, tragically died. The assistant continued talking, but turned away, and I lost the ability to read her lips. Sophia looked pale, shocked. She asked something of the director, and he nodded with a serious expression. But what truly disturbed me was the fleeting smirk on the producer's face, who stood slightly behind. He exchanged glances with some man in the corner of the room whom I hadn't noticed before. The man barely nodded. Something was wrong here. Sophia got the role, but under what circumstances? Who was Lucia Garcia? How was she connected to this role? What kind of accident? I disconnected from the surveillance system and sent Mike a message of gratitude. Then I asked the taxi driver to take me home. I was filled with conflicting emotions. Relief, Sophia wasn't cheating on me. Shame, I hadn't trusted her, had spied on her like a suspect. And a new, troubling feeling that wouldn't let me calm down. Something about this film company was wrong. Something about this role was dangerous. I remembered the producer's strange smile at the mention of the actress's death. Not grief, not regret, satisfaction, as if the plan had worked exactly as needed. I decided I wouldn't talk to Sophia about what I'd seen. Not now. First, I needed to gather more information, understand what we were dealing with. The sense of danger which I'd learned to recognize in hot spots had never failed me, and now it was screaming. When the taxi arrived at the house, I already knew. I would have to use all the skills acquired during 12 years in special forces, but not to fight terrorists or drug cartels. This time to protect my own wife. Chapter 2: Investigation. I was sitting in the dark living room when the key turned in the front door lock. 7:43 p.m. Sophia returned 27 minutes later than usual, not a critical delay, but enough to notice. "Eric, are you home?" Her voice sounded different, elevated, with that special vibrating tone that appeared when she was barely containing joy. I flicked on the table lamp switch, watching as she jumped in surprise. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," I said, rising from the armchair. "Saving electricity." Sophia laughed genuinely like a bell. My Sophia, not the woman from the photographs. You, always sitting in the dark, like some secret agent on a mission. If only she knew how close to the truth that was. She kicked off her shoes, expensive but practical, low-heeled, and flew to me, wrapping her arms around my neck. She smelled of floral perfume, coffee, and the barely perceptible scent of film stock. A professional smell. "I have amazing news," she burst out, looking at me with shining eyes. "Remember that project with Ariadne I told you about? Alan Foster's thriller." "The Last Breath," I clarified, maintaining a neutral expression. "Yes," she nodded, obviously not noticing that I knew the film's title, although she hadn't mentioned it before. "I got the lead role. Can you imagine, the lead, with Alan Foster?" I feigned surprise, raised my eyebrows, opened my eyes wide. You learn this when interrogating prisoners who shouldn't guess that you already know their secrets. "Congratulations, honey, that's amazing." I was genuinely happy for her. Sophia worked on her career with the same dedication I once trained for missions in hot spots. A role with a renowned director, her personal Kandahar, just without the shooting and the blood. So far without blood. Sophia bustled around in the kitchen, taking a bottle of champagne from the refrigerator that she kept for special occasions, and told me about the selection process, how the director personally chose her among dozens of contenders. I listened, nodded, asked the right questions, but part of my consciousness continued to analyze the situation. She didn't mention the nature of the role, didn't talk about erotic scenes, about the photographs, not a word. We opened the champagne, clinked glasses, and I finally asked the question that a normal, unsuspecting husband should ask. So what's the film about? Sophia looked away, taking a big sip from her glass, a clear sign of nervousness, which I recognized from hundreds of interrogations. It's a psychological thriller with elements of, she fell silent, choosing her words, with elements of erotic drama. So there will be explicit scenes, I stated in an even voice. She exhaled, as if preparing for a blow. Yes, quite explicit, but it's an important part of the plot, not just exploitation, you understand. The heroine uses her sexuality as a weapon too. Sophia, I interrupted gently, you're an actress. I knew who I was marrying. Her shoulders relaxed, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from them. I was so afraid you'd be jealous, she admitted. You can be so possessive. I smiled, trying to make the smile look natural. I'm possessive when it comes to your safety, but not your talent. She kissed me, long, deep, with gratitude. I responded, trying not to think about those photographs, not to imagine her with another man. Professional work, I reminded myself. Just work. That night we made love as usual, tenderly, passionately, without long foreplay. Sophia was never fond of experiments in bed. Another reason why the photographs seemed so wrong, so alien. Afterward, when she fell asleep, curled up with her back pressed against my chest, I stared into the darkness, replaying the day's events in my mind. Lucia Garcia, accident on set, tragically died. Something told me this was only the beginning. A month flew by like a single day. Sophia was fully immersed in filming, often returning after midnight, barely keeping on her feet from exhaustion. We saw each other less frequently, but this was normal. Acting work rarely coincides with a standard work schedule. I wasn't idle. After leaving the Army, I founded a small security firm, security consultations for individuals and companies. Business wasn't as booming as I would have liked, but stable. Former military personnel are valued in this field. That morning I woke up as usual, 17 seconds before the alarm. Sophia wasn't beside me. She had stayed overnight at a hotel near the studio. The shooting ran far past midnight, and the director insisted that the actors rest before the next difficult day. At least that's how she explained it. I completed my morning routine and went out for the mail. Usually, Sophia handled this. She liked receiving paper letters, advertising brochures, magazines. The little things of normal life that she was deprived of in childhood, constantly moving with her diplomat parents. Among the advertisements and bills lay a cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no postmark. Someone had placed it in the box personally. My heart skipped a beat. I knew this envelope, knew this thick, expensive paper. I returned to the house, closed the door. Only after that did I carefully open the envelope. Inside again were photographs, but this time they weren't staged. In the pictures, Sophia and a man, not the one who was in the first photographs, were in a hotel room. Standard luxury suite judging by the furnishings. First frame, they enter the room, he has his hand on her lower back. Second, sitting on the edge of the bed, talking. Her posture speaks of tension, shoulders raised, back straight. Third, he pours wine into 2 glasses. Fourth, his hand on her thigh. Fifth, she in underwear, his hand in her hair. Sixth, naked bodies on the bed. The shots were taken by a hidden camera, installed somewhere near the ceiling. Grainy, but clear enough to identify faces. Attached to the photographs was a note printed. She doesn't deserve this role. Copies have already been sent to the tabloids. You have 24 hours. I looked at the pictures, and time slowed down as it does before a shot. My brain worked with cold efficiency, analyzing the information. First, these were not shots from the film set, too intimate, too real. Second, Sophia looked tense, not passionate. This didn't look like infidelity out of love or passion. Third, the pictures were taken professionally from an ideal angle. Someone had prepared in advance. Fourth, the note said she doesn't deserve the role. Not your wife is cheating on you, but specifically about the role. I carefully folded the photographs back into the envelope. My hands didn't shake, training and experience, but inside, everything was boiling. Show Sophia. No, she would deny, explain, and I wouldn't learn the truth. Besides, if she was really in danger, better not to show that I'm aware. Let her think her secret is safe. I put the envelope in the safe behind the painting in my office, old-fashioned but reliable. Sophia never went in there without me. Then I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Mike, it's me again. Need another favor." Lucia Garcia, 28 years old, an up-and-coming actress with an impressive resume. Born in Barcelona, studied at the London School of Dramatic Art, appeared in several independent films. Was cast for the lead role in Alan Foster's The Last Breath. Tragically died 3 months ago during the filming of a scene on a high-rise parking lot. Fell from the 5th floor due to faulty safety equipment. All this information was publicly available: obituaries, articles in professional journals, colleagues' condolences on social media. Standard Hollywood tragedy, a young star whose life was cut short on the rise. But I dug deeper. Mike provided me access to police reports. Former military have their channels in law enforcement. Official conclusion: accident. Case closed. Too quickly closed, too clean. I began looking for information about other accidents related to Ariadne. It took time. Not everything was digitized, not everything was publicly available. But I was patient. In Delta, they taught us, real investigation isn't a Hollywood chase with gunfire but long, methodical work. And here's what I discovered. Alina Kurtz, 25 years old, drowned during the filming of an underwater scene for the movie Deep Fear 2 years ago. Scuba gear suddenly failed. Miriam Jones, 30 years old, died in a fire on the set of the film Game with Death 18 months ago. Special effects went out of control. Angela Lee, 27 years old, crashed on a motorcycle during a stunt for the action movie Last Rush a year ago. Brakes failed. Natasha Petrova, 29 years old, died from anaphylactic shock after an allergen which even she didn't know about was added to her makeup. 9 months ago, the film Red Mist. And now Lucia Garcia. 5 cases, 5 beautiful, talented women, 5 accidents during the filming of movies by the same company. Too many for coincidence, too few for statistics, perfect number for a pattern. All the deceased actresses were approximately the same age, the same type of appearance, dark-haired, fair-skinned with expressive eyes. All were at the peak of their careers, all received roles that dozens of others had auditioned for. Sophia fit perfectly into this profile. I closed the laptop and closed my eyes, trying to piece together the puzzle. What connected these deaths? Why hadn't the police noticed the pattern? Or had they noticed but decided not to investigate? Additional information was needed, and for that, I needed to penetrate where no one had invited me. Night is the best time for infiltration. The human brain is least active between 2 and 4 a.m., even for trained guards. Fatigue cannot be completely defeated, only temporarily pushed aside. The skyscraper housing Ariadne's main office was lit up like a Christmas tree, typical practice for corporate buildings. Creates an illusion of security, but actually only helps intruders. In absolute darkness, it's harder to determine what is normal and what is a deviation. I left my car 5 blocks away in an underground parking garage of a shopping center. Clothing: black tactical pants with multiple pockets, dark turtleneck, light boots with soft soles. In my backpack: tools I never purchased officially. Building security: 2 people at the entrance, 2 more patrolling the floors. Standard surveillance cameras, magnetic locks on doors, pass scanners. Serious for an ordinary business center, but not for someone who infiltrated fortified bases in Afghanistan. I had observed the building for 3 days, studying the personnel shift schedule, patrol routes, camera locations. Mike provided a diagram of engineering communications. Don't ask where he got it. I entered the building through the service entrance used by cleaners. The electronic lock yielded in 30 seconds. Some skills are not forgotten. Producer Richard Klein's office was on the 24th floor. I climbed the service stairs, slowly, silently, stopping at each landing to listen to the surroundings. On the 24th floor, I paused behind the door, scanning the corridor with a portable thermal imager. Empty. Surveillance cameras were directed at elevators and the central passage, a typical error in security system design. People think about main routes and forget about the periphery. Klein's office was a corner room with panoramic windows, luxury and status display. The lock on the door was more complex, a biometric scanner and card reader. I took out a device resembling a smartphone, but heavier. Military development that should never have left the war zone. A small EMP generator capable of temporarily disabling electronics within a half-meter radius. The lock clicked, the indicator went out, I quickly slipped inside. The office was impressive. Antique furniture, paintings, clearly originals, a glass table the size of half my living room, and not a single computer. Strange. In our time, even the most conservative executives use digital technologies. I began methodically searching the room, avoiding the central part which might be equipped with motion sensors. First the cabinets along the walls, business papers, contracts, nothing unusual. Then the desks, bedside tables, ordinary office supplies. And then I noticed a small discrepancy in the parquet pattern near the far wall. Barely noticeable, but for a person trained to look for hidden hatches and hiding places in the Tora Bora Mountains, as obvious as daylight. Pressing on a certain part of the wall, I was rewarded with a quiet click. Part of the wall moved aside, revealing a small room. Inside stood a solitary computer on a metal table. No decorations, no luxury, pure functionality. I turned on the computer. Standard protection system, password, 2-factor authentication. Nothing complicated for the device I extracted from my backpack. A small gray box with a USB connector, developed for hacking Iranian servers. In 4 minutes I was inside the system. The files were organized with military precision, each project in a separate folder, subfolders by years, months, production stages. I opened the folder The Last Breath and began reviewing documents. Budget, shooting schedule, contracts with actors, nothing unusual. But one folder caught my attention, bets. It was protected by an additional password which proved harder to crack, but I was persistent. What I saw made me freeze, with a feeling of ice in my veins. Tables, charts, lists of names, sums with 6 and 7 zeros, scans of bank transfers. It was a betting pool, real, organized with a clear structure, but the bets weren't placed on horses or sports teams. Bets were placed on actresses' lives. Lot 734, Lucia Garcia, survivability scene 47, fall from height. Current odds 15, 1 against survival. Lot 735, Miriam Jones, survivability scene 29, building fire. Current odds 8, 1 against survival. And so on for each of the deceased actresses. I opened the most recent document and saw Sophia's name. Lot 738, Sophia Shepard, survivability scene 34, underwater filming. Current odds 5, 1 against survival. Note in red, high stakes, VIP clients interested in fatal outcome. I felt sick, not from fear but from pure, undiluted rage. They used death as entertainment, as a gambling game, and my wife was the next chip in their casino. I continued searching and came across a folder titled Compromat. Inside, photographs of actresses with men in compromising situations, including those very shots of Sophia that I received this morning. A text document nearby explained the scheme. The photographs were used as a guarantee that the actress wouldn't refuse the dangerous scene. If she refused, the pictures would go to the tabloids, career ruined, reputation destroyed, especially for married women. The perfect trap. I inserted a flash drive and began copying files. Not all, just the most important. Documentation on bets, photographs, bank transfers. Suddenly I heard voices in the corridor. Guards, not according to schedule. Something had alarmed them. I quickly finished copying, closed all files, and turned off the computer. The secret room closed with the same quiet click with which it had opened. Now I needed to get out, and fast. The voices were approaching. Two people, footsteps heavy, purposeful. Not a regular patrol, they were looking for someone. I looked around, evaluating options. Windows sealed shut, unbreakable glass. Door the only exit, but the guards would also enter through it. Ventilation too small for an adult. Only improvisation remained. I quickly moved to the ceiling, using decorative columns along the walls as support. An old trick from mountain operations. No one ever looks up. The door opened. Two men entered, men in black suits with professional bearing and alert eyes. Not ordinary shopping center guards, former military, possibly even special services. "Clear here," said one, surveying the office. "Sensors showed movement 5 minutes ago," replied the other, keeping his hand on the holster under his jacket. "Check the hideout." They knew about the secret room, so they were part of the system, not just simple performers. The first guard approached the wall and activated the mechanism. The room opened. "Computer is on," he said tensely. "Someone was here." "Check the access logs," commanded the second, taking out his pistol. "I'll examine the office." He began methodically checking the room, moving from the door to the windows, from the desk to the cabinets. Sooner or later, he would look up and see me. I assessed the situation. 2 against 1, they had weapons, knowledge of the terrain, communication with the rest of the security. I had the element of surprise and close combat skills. Uneven odds, but there were no other options. When the second guard passed directly beneath me, I made my move. Jump, strike with the base of the palm to the chin. Simultaneously, the other hand intercepts the wrist with the pistol. The guard didn't even have time to cry out. The blow severed nerve endings, temporarily depriving him of voice and coordination. The pistol fell from his hand but didn't touch the floor. I caught it in midair. The first guard jumped out of the secret room, saw his partner collapsing to the floor and me with the weapon. His hand jerked toward the holster but was a fraction of a second too late. "Don't move," I said quietly, aiming the pistol at the center of his chest. "Hands where I can see them." He froze, slowly raising his hands. In his eyes I read surprise, not fear but precisely surprise. He clearly didn't expect to meet a professional. "Who are you?" he asked. "What do you want?" "The truth about the last breath," I replied. "About the bets, about the deaths." His face changed. Surprise was replaced by something resembling relief. "You're Sophia Shepard's husband," he said. "Not a question, a statement." I didn't answer, but everything inside tensed. They knew who I was. "Listen," the guard continued. "This isn't what you think, we're not." He didn't finish. The office door burst open, and 4 more men in the same uniform rushed in. I realized that the first 2 were just stalling for time, waiting for reinforcements. I managed to fire twice. into one's shoulder, into another's leg, not fatal but enough to put them out of action. Then something hit me from behind, a taser, judging by the sensations. Muscles seized with a spasm, the pistol fell from numbed fingers. Before losing consciousness, I saw another person entering the office. Tall, elegant, with perfect posture, and a gaze that looked at an interesting specimen under a microscope. "So it's him," I heard his voice before darkness engulfed my consciousness. "Interesting, very interesting." I came to with a jerk, as trained in exercises. No groans, no movements, no change in breathing. First, assess the situation without revealing that I've regained consciousness. Smells, dust, metal, equipment, lubricant. Sounds, muffled voices nearby, ventilation humming, distant car noise. Body position, sitting on a chair, hands behind back, handcuffs, legs also attached to the chair legs. I opened my eyes, just enough to see through my eyelashes. Large room, a studio or warehouse converted into a film set. Soft boxes, cameras, lighting equipment. In the center, a deep pool with transparent walls filled with water. Above it, a metal structure with platforms at different heights. I was attached to a chair in the corner of the room, partially hidden behind lighting equipment. From here, I had a view of the entire studio, but I couldn't be seen from the central platform. By the pool stood a group of people, a young assistant with a tablet, an elderly man with underwater filming equipment, several technicians, and Sophia. She stood at the edge of the pool in a swimsuit, apparently preparing for a scene. She looked focused, but not frightened. She didn't know what was really happening. "He's awake," said a voice to my right. I turned my head. Beside me stood that same elegant man whom I saw last before losing consciousness. About 60, impeccably dressed, with the posture of a man accustomed to power. Eyes cold, studying, like an entomologist examining a particularly interesting insect. "Mr. Shepard," he said with a slight accent that I couldn't precisely identify. "Allow me to introduce myself. They call me the investor." I remained silent. In captivity situations, the best tactic is not to give the opponent information, even as insignificant as knowing that you hear him. "No need to pretend," the investor continued. "We know who you are, know about your service, about your skills, impressive record, I must say." He paused, studying my reaction. Receiving no answer, he smiled slightly. "You discovered our little project, an impressive achievement. Most people couldn't even suspect its existence." I still remained silent, but inside everything was boiling. This man spoke about actresses' lives and deaths as a project. "Look," he pointed to the pool. "Now your wife will be rehearsing scene 34, underwater chase. A very complex stunt. Requires special preparation, endurance, the ability to hold breath for a long time." Sophia put on a wetsuit handed to her by an assistant. Technicians were checking the equipment. "Of course, for normal filming, doubles and underwater stunt specialists are used," the investor continued. "But our clients prefer authenticity, real risk, real emotions." I couldn't hold back. "You're a dirty organizer of fights without rules. Only instead of fighters you use actresses," I said through clenched teeth. The investor laughed, a quiet, restrained laugh of a man not accustomed to expressing emotions openly. "Oh no, Mr. Shepard, you haven't understood the most interesting part. We don't place bets on actresses. We place bets on people who love these actresses, on how far they're willing to go for salvation." He leaned closer. 5 deceased actresses, a tragedy of course, but they were just bait. The real game began afterward, when fathers, brothers, husbands tried to avenge. When they infiltrated our offices, hacked our systems, monitored our personnel. When they, like you now, were here, ready for anything to save their loved ones. I felt my blood growing cold. This wasn't just sadism. This was something more perverted, more complex. "What exactly do you want?" I asked, trying to maintain calm. From you, the investor smiled. Participation in our game. You see, right now Sophia is preparing for a very dangerous scene. The equipment, let's say, not entirely reliable. Probability of an accident high. He paused. But we have another option. You, with your experience and skills, could replace the stuntman in several scenes of the film. Scenes with real risk to life. If you handle all the tests, we'll release your wife. If not, well, she'll still film her underwater scene, with the same chances of success. Why should I believe you? I asked. Because you have no choice, the investor simply replied. And because the game is more interesting when players believe in the possibility of victory. He nodded to someone behind my back. The handcuffs clicked, freeing my hands and feet. Decide, Mr. Shepard. Your wife's time is running out. I looked at the pool. Sophia was already standing at the edge, preparing to dive. A technician was handing her an air tank, small, clearly with a limited supply. All right, I said, I agree. The investor smiled, not joyfully, but with the cold satisfaction of a chess player who has forced an opponent into a hopeless position. Excellent, let the game begin. Chapter 3, The Test. The world narrowed to a single point, Sophia's face by the pool. She was focused, professional, unaware that at this moment her fate was being decided. The investor lightly tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair, observing my reaction. Polite, restrained, with the face of a surgeon discussing a complex operation. Nothing personal, just business. I had dealt with different types of sadists, religious fanatics in the mountains of Afghanistan, field commanders with delusions of grandeur, drug lords who turned cruelty into art. But there was always a certain primitiveness in their sadism, an animal thirst for others' pain, assertion of superiority through humiliation of others. The investor was from a different world, an intellectual sadist for whom human tragedies were material for study, almost scientific. Such are more dangerous than all. You must understand the scale of our project, he continued, while I sat in the chair calculating attack options. This is not just a gambling game. This is a study of human nature in extreme conditions. He signaled, and one of the guards handed him a tablet. You see, Mr. Shepard, we've created a unique system. Actresses attract attention, create a dramatic story, but the real stars are their protectors. Brothers, fathers, husbands, those ready for anything to save their loved ones. He turned the tablet screen toward me. On it was a list of names. Next to each, a photograph and numbers. Nicholas Petrov, Natasha's brother. Former GRU Special Forces. Passed 3 tests, failed on the 4th, fall from height. Probability of success was 28%, he exceeded expectations. He scrolled through the page. Marcus Lee, Angela's husband, former Marine. 4 tests, died on the 5th, no rules fight with a professional fighter. Probability of success, 15%. Amazing endurance. I felt nauseated by the cold, statistical approach to human lives. Game is not the word, said the investor, as if reading my thoughts. This is the evolution of entertainment. Our clients are people tired of everything. Billionaires who have nothing more to desire, nothing to fear. They seek genuine emotions. The stake in our game is not money, but real life, real devotion. They pay millions to see how far a person can go for love. And what's stopping me from breaking your neck right now? I asked in a colorless voice. 4 armed guards behind your back, the investor smiled. And the fact that in case of your unsuccessful attempt, your wife will immediately become a victim of an accident. See the man at the pool control panel. 1 button press, and the air supply system in her scuba gear will fail. I looked in the indicated direction. The technician at the console met my gaze and barely nodded. But mainly, the investor continued, we offer you a chance. You pass our tests, we release your wife. No persecution, no threats. You'll be the first to complete the entire program. This is valuable for our clients. And if I refuse, then we'll return to the original plan, the investor shrugged. Sophia will perform her dangerous stunt, with real, not staged risk to life. And who knows, maybe she'll survive. Odds are somewhere 1 to 5. And someone will also earn money or lose, but everyone will definitely get thrills. I looked at my wife. She was smiling, listening to something the director was saying, trusting, unsuspecting that the entire film crew was participating in a perverted spectacle. There was no choice. There never was. All right, I said, I agree. Excellent, nodded the investor, as if I had just accepted his offer of a profitable real estate deal. You will have 5 tests, 5 chances to prove your devotion. He stood up, adjusting his impeccable jacket. Prepare him for the first test, he threw to the guards. We'll begin in an hour. I was given clothes, simple, functional, made of fire-resistant fabric. Black pants, gray t-shirt, light boots with thin soles. I changed in a small makeup room, noting all potential exits, surveillance cameras, possible improvised weapons. The guards watched me with professional vigilance, didn't come too close, kept their hands near holsters, maintained distance from each other so I couldn't neutralize them with one movement. Professionals, as I thought. But they didn't have what I had, absolute readiness to die. This always gives an advantage. I was led to the main film set. What was previously a film studio now looked like an ancient Roman arena. In the center, an open space surrounded by lighting equipment. Above them, darkened boxes where silhouettes of people were vaguely visible. Sophia sat in a chair with actress written on the back at some distance from the arena. Beside her, assistants, makeup artists, other crew members. She waved to me, clearly surprised by my presence. Your husband agreed to help us with some scenes. I heard the director's voice explaining the situation to her. He has military experience, ideal for these stunts. Sophia frowned, not frightened but puzzled. I tried to smile at her so as not to arouse suspicion. In the center of the platform, I saw a construction that I identified as the first test. A wall about 3 meters high in front of it, a shallow trench filled with some kind of liquid. Technical specialists bustled around, checking equipment. The investor appeared from behind the scenes, now dressed in an impeccable tuxedo, as if at an opera premiere. Welcome to our modest arena, Mr. Shepard, he said, approaching me. Allow me to explain the rules of the first test. He pointed to the wall. This is a classic of stunt art, jumping through a wall of fire. The simplest test of all that await you. You run up, jump over a trench with flammable mixture, overcome the wall, and land on a mat on the other side. Sounds simple, I remarked. Oh, of course, the investor smiled. For a professional stuntman, but there are nuances. First, the flammable mixture is not prop but real. Flame temperature, about 800 degrees Celsius. Second, the fireproof suit that stuntmen usually use is replaced with ordinary fire-resistant fabric. It protects, but not completely. Third, the wall is covered with a special compound that ignites upon contact with flame. He paused, observing my reaction. In short, you will be jumping practically without protection through real fire, which will engulf you in the air. Your skills and speed will determine how severe burns you will receive. Between 80 and 90% of stuntmen would refuse such a stunt. And if I refuse, then your wife will immediately proceed to her underwater stunt, with those very odds I mentioned. I nodded. There was still no choice. The investor moved to a small elevation from where the entire hall was visible. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the darkened boxes. Our first participant is ready to begin the performance. Please place your bets. I heard muffled movement in the boxes, whispers, rustle of clothes, quiet clink of champagne glasses, like in a theater before the start of a performance. Only the stake in this performance was my life. The director, a gray-haired man with the appearance of a professor, approached me with a professional smile. "To make everything look authentic for filming," he said, pointing to the cameras. I understood. He was part of this spectacle. Possibly didn't know all the details, but definitely wasn't an innocent victim. Technicians ignited the liquid in the trench. Flames shot upward, greedy, orange-blue, real. Heat hit my face even from several meters away. I stepped back to the starting position, took a deep breath, concentrated. Analyzed the task. Sufficient run-up to overcome the trench. Strong push to jump as high as possible over the fire. Minimal contact with the wall surface. Tuck for landing, roll to dampen inertia and extinguish possible clothing ignition. Another inhale, exhale. Run, 4, 5, 6 steps acceleration. Push strong with full commitment. Flight over the trench heat of fire like a blow to the skin. Hands behind head covering the neck, the most vulnerable spot. Contact with the wall and it flares up as the investor promised. Flames engulf clothing, hair, burned skin. Flying over the top of the wall. Falling. Tucking, rolling, patting body, extinguishing flames. Everything happens in seconds, but each moment stretches as if I'm in slow motion. I feel pain, sharp, wild, but familiar. Pain is an old friend for those who have undergone special training. It can be accepted, categorized, set aside for later examination. I rise to my feet. The t-shirt is burnt on the back and sleeves. Skin on forearms and neck is red, in places blisters, first and second-degree burns. Painful but tolerable, not fatal. The investor descends to the arena, applauding, slowly, calculatedly, maintaining a polite smile. "Bravo, Mr. Shepard, you exceeded expectations. Most experts bet that you would receive at least 40% body burns, and you have." He appraisingly looked me over. "No more than 10%. Impressive result." "What's next?" I asked, ignoring the pain. "Oh, let's not rush," the investor smiles. "A doctor will examine your burns, provide first aid. You'll rest for a couple of hours, restore your strength. The night is long, we have 4 more tests ahead." He extends his hand, as if for a business handshake. "Congratulations on your first success. With each test, the stakes increase, Mr. Shepard. After this stunt, our clients have already tripled their initial investments." I don't respond to the handshake. The investor doesn't look offended. On the contrary, he seems amused by my restraint. From the corner of my eye, I see Sophia. She looks at me with a mixture of concern and strange pride. For her, this is still part of the film, a dangerous but controlled process, where her husband unexpectedly displayed hidden stuntman talents. If only she knew the truth. The second test began 3 hours later. My burns were treated, professionally, qualitatively, but with minimum painkillers. Pain was to remain part of the spectacle. Now the arena had transformed. In the center, a narrow ledge no more than half a meter wide, raised to a height of 5 meters above the floor. Around it, soft mats, but everyone understood their true purpose, not to protect me from falling, but to provide a good view for spectators. The investor explained the rules, like a gracious host of a quiz show. "Combat at height, Mr. Shepard. You and 4 of our fighters, 2 on each side of the ledge. The task is simple: stay on the platform. Who falls is out. The last one remaining the winner." "And if they win?" I asked, stretching the muscles injured from burns. "Then the test is not passed," the investor shrugged, "and we move on to the underwater scene with your charming spouse." This time Sophia wasn't on the set. She had been taken to another scene to prepare for some of her episodes. This was for the better. I didn't want her to see me being beaten. And that I would be beaten, I had no doubt. My opponents turned out to be what I expected: professional fighters, possibly with experience in MMA or underground fights. Powerful, trained bodies, cold eyes of people accustomed to causing pain. I climbed onto the ledge. 2 stood in front of me, 2 more behind. No rules except one: stay on the platform. Madness to fight 4 against 1 on a narrow ledge. But that was the point, to create a situation doomed to failure, to make viewers believe in the inevitability of my defeat, and then, in the fact that the investor expected me to win, I had no doubt. Otherwise, there would be no point in this show. The fight began without warning. The fighter closest to me attacked first, a straight punch to the jaw, a classic opening. I dodged the blow, allowing him to move forward by inertia, and gave a slight push when he was at the edge. He lost balance and crashed onto the mats. 1 down, 3 left. The second attacked from behind. I felt the movement of air when he swung. Duck down, roll under his arms, and now I'm behind his back. Kick to the lower back, and he flies after the first. 2 down, 2 left. The remaining fighters exchanged glances and attacked simultaneously, one from the front, one from behind. Classic technique, effective against most opponents, but not against someone trained for combat while surrounded. I jumped at the last moment, allowing them to collide with each other. Not strongly, they were too experienced for that, but enough to create a second's confusion. That second was enough. A series of strikes, elbow to the solar plexus of one, knee to the face of the other. The fighter on the right staggered, lost balance. I grabbed him by the collar and used him as a counterweight to deliver a kick to the head of the last opponent. He fell like a cut-down tree. The one I was holding tried to twist away, but I had already redirected his movement, using inertia against himself. Another moment, and he flew after his comrades. The entire fight took less than a minute. I stood on the narrow ledge, breathing heavily. The burns pulsated with pain. New injuries were added: split lip, bruised ribs, but I stood. In the boxes, applause sounded, restrained, almost ironic. The investor looked at me with undisguised interest, like a scientist observing a particularly successful experiment. "Excellent," he said. "Clean, efficient, without unnecessary drama. Military training is felt in every movement." I jumped off the ledge, landing on the mats. Pain pierced my body, but I didn't show it. "What's next?" I asked. "Oh, we're just beginning," the investor smiled. "The next test will require not only your combat skills, but also technical mastery." The third test was exactly as he promised. A motorcycle, an old Ducati with a modified engine. A track laid through the scenery of an abandoned city. And mines, real anti-personnel mines, placed throughout the route. "The task is extremely simple," the investor explained. "Ride from start to finish in 3 minutes. The route is marked with red flags. Deviation from the route is fraught with consequences." "And if I simply refuse?" I asked, examining the motorcycle. "We have already discussed the consequences," the investor shrugged. "But if you want, we can invite your wife and explain the game rules to her. I'm sure she will be impressed by your self-sacrifice." "No need," I quickly said. "I'll ride." I sat on the motorcycle, checked the controls. The machine was in good condition. They didn't want me to crash due to a technical malfunction. That wouldn't add drama to their show. The track wound between concrete blocks, simulating ruined buildings. Red flags marked the route, narrow, with sharp turns, clearly designed for maximum tension of the rider. The mines weren't visible, and therein lay the main danger. They could be anywhere, under a thin layer of soil, around a turn, in a narrow passage between blocks. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and tore from the start. The first 30 seconds passed relatively calmly, sharp turns, narrow passages, but no explosions. Then, on a curve, the ground heaved to my right, the first mine triggered by the motorcycle's vibration. The shock wave hit my ears, fragments rattled against the helmet and jacket. I held the handlebar, made the turn, continued moving. The next mine exploded right in front. I barely managed to wrench the handlebar, directing the motorcycle into a narrow passage between 2 concrete blocks. The machine passed through with just inches to spare, leaving paint on the concrete. Then real madness began. Mines went off one after another. Someone was clearly controlling their detonation, creating the most spectacular picture for viewers. I heard explosions from all sides, felt fragments piercing my skin, felt the ground trembling under the wheels. But I continued moving, guided not only by flags but by my own intuition. I had always been good at sensing danger. The last section was the most difficult, a straight road studded with mines. There was no choice, only speed. I pressed the throttle to the limit, trying to outpace the detonation, to slip through before the blast wave caught the motorcycle. I crossed the finish in a cloud of dust and fragments, accompanied by a series of explosions resembling festive fireworks. 3 minutes and 12 seconds, delayed. I stopped the motorcycle, removed the helmet, looked at the investor. He stood next to a huge clock showing the time 3:12. "You exceeded the time limit, Mr. Shepard," he noted. "You said 3 minutes. Didn't specify what would happen if I'm late," I parried. The investor smiled. For the first time that evening, it looked almost sincere. "Indeed, I didn't specify. Well, consider it a bonus. After all, you survived a minefield. That in itself is an achievement." I looked myself over. The jacket torn by fragments, new scratches and cuts added to the burns. But all limbs intact, no serious injuries. "What's next?" I asked now habitually. "Next, water," replied the investor, "and there your combat skills may not be so useful." The fourth test was exactly as he promised, ice-cold water in a deep pool. Hands tied behind back with strong plastic zip ties. Feet free, but in heavy boots, weighing down the submersion. "The task is simple," the investor explained. "Dive, find a key at the bottom of the pool, free your hands, surface. The pool is 6 meters deep, water 3 degrees Celsius. Average survival time in such water without movement, 15-20 minutes. Given physical activity, half that." I stood at the edge of the pool, looking into the dark water. A classic test for special forces, only usually done with instructors and safety measures. "Begin when you're ready," said the investor, moving to his place. I took several deep breaths, saturating blood with oxygen. Then one more, the deepest, and jumped. Cold hit like a sledgehammer. Breath caught, body instinctively tried to curl up. I forced myself to relax, allowed the heavy boots to sink deeper. The water became darker with each meter. At the bottom of the pool, a faint shimmer. The key, illuminated by a small flashlight for ease of finding, or for drama, so viewers could see how close I was to salvation but couldn't reach it. I reached the bottom, swam to the key. Now the most difficult part, taking it without using hands. I flipped over, grabbed the key with my teeth, turned so that I could bring it to my hands tied behind my back. Lungs burned from lack of oxygen. The brain began to panic, demanding a breath. I ignored these signals, another part of training, the ability to work under oxygen starvation. The key touched the zip ties. I felt for the lock, inserted the key, turned. Click, hands free. Now I could swim up. But something was wrong. I pushed off from the bottom but couldn't rise higher. Something was holding me. Looking down, I saw that the tie on my leg had caught on a metal hook at the bottom of the pool. A trap. They weren't going to make this test easy. Lungs burned like fire. Black spots began to blur before my eyes, a sign of hypoxia approaching loss of consciousness. I leaned down, tried to free my leg. The tie wouldn't yield. "The key, maybe it fits this lock too." I dove back, felt for the lock on the tie, inserted the key. Another turn and I was free. But oxygen was almost gone. The brain desperately demanded a breath. Instinct screamed, breathe, breathe, breathe. I pushed off from the bottom, rushed toward the surface. 3 meters, 2, 1. Emerged, greedily gulping air. Lungs hurt as if filled with broken glass. Body trembled from cold and tension. But I was alive. The investor stood by the pool, looking at his watch. 3 minutes and 47 seconds underwater, he announced. Impressive. Most professional divers cannot hold their breath longer than 2 minutes, especially during active activity. I climbed out of the pool, shivering from cold. Medics threw a thermal blanket over me, but I pushed them away. What's next? I forced out through chattering teeth. Next, the final test, replied the investor. But first, a small intermission. You must restore your strength. He made a sign, and guards brought Sophia to me. She rushed to me, embraces warm, real, sincere. Eric, what's happening? She whispered. They said you agreed to dangerous stunts, but you're all wounded. Everything's fine, I replied, trying to make my voice sound calm. Just work. What work? You're a security consultant, not a stuntman. I gently cupped her face in my palms, looked into her eyes. Trust me, okay? Everything will be fine. This is a military contract. Can't tell you the details. She looked at me with disbelief, but nodded. Always trusted me, even when she didn't understand my decisions. Time for reunion has expired, said the investor, approaching us. Mr. Shepard, your final test awaits, the most important one. The fifth test was to begin in an hour. I was given dry clothes, allowed to rest in a small room resembling a dressing room. I used this time to restore strength and think through a plan. 4 tests passed, each next one more difficult than the previous. What would be the last? What could be more difficult than surviving on a minefield or in ice-cold water with tied hands? And most importantly, what would happen after? The investor promised to release Sophia if I passed all the tests. But can one trust a man who organized a betting pool on human lives? The door opened, and the investor himself entered, as always impeccably dressed, as if he hadn't spent the last hours watching my torments. It's time, Mr. Shepard, he said. Our guests are waiting for the final act. I stood up, ignoring the pain throughout my body. What happens next, after the last test? If you survive, the investor clarified, we will keep our word. You and your wife will be free. No persecution, no threats. And if I decide to go to the police? He smiled condescendingly, as an adult smiles at a naive child. With what evidence? We are professionals, Mr. Shepard. All our clients are people with impeccable reputations and connections in the highest circles. Your story will look like the raving of a paranoid. He was right, and I knew it. The system protects its own. Now let's go, said the investor. Let's not keep the audience waiting. The arena had changed again. Now it was an open space without additional structures. In the center stood a simple metal frame to which a person in a hood was tied. Your final test, Mr. Shepard, announced the investor, addressing me and the spectators in the darkened boxes. Extremely simple. You must kill this person. I froze, trying to comprehend his words. Is he a criminal? I asked. What difference does it make? The investor shrugged. He is necessary for our spectacle. Isn't that the main thing? He handed me a pistol, an ordinary Glock 19, well familiar to me from service. One shot to the head, clean and simple. I took the pistol, checked the magazine. 1 bullet as promised. And if I refuse? Then everything was in vain, the investor simply replied. Your wife will die, you too. And our guest, he nodded to the person in the hood, won't survive either. So the choice is obvious, isn't it? I headed to the center of the arena, gripping the pistol. My brain frantically searched for a way out, another solution. I could shoot the investor, but that wouldn't save Sophia. The security surely had orders to kill her in case of unforeseen circumstances. I approached the person in the hood. He didn't move, didn't make sounds, unconscious, dead, drugged. I raised the pistol, aimed at the head covered with black fabric. Finger lay on the trigger. And at that moment, the lights went out. Absolute darkness, sudden and complete. I instinctively jumped aside, moved away from the open space, took a combat stance. Seconds dragged in darkness. Then emergency lighting came on, dim, reddish. In this ghostly light, I saw one of the spectators stand in his box and tear off his mask. Colonel Daniel Craig, my former commander, a man I thought had died a year ago in an operation in Syria. "Shepard," he pronounced in his characteristic hoarse voice, "not bad for a warm-up." I froze, not believing my eyes. "Colonel, what are you doing here?" "The same as you," he replied, "passing a test, only mine lasted longer, much longer." The investor applauded, standing to the side with a satisfied smile. "That was impressive, Colonel Craig," he said. "You passed your own test flawlessly. A whole year undercover in the role of a deceased officer. Even I began to believe that you were truly one of us." "All this a spectacle?" I asked, shifting my gaze from the investor to Craig. "All these tests, threats to Sophia?" "Oh, the threats were real," the investor smiled. "As was the danger, as were the stakes, just the scale was larger than you thought." Craig descended from his place, approached me. "Shepard, listen to me. I've been tracking this organization for a year. They call themselves the Theater. They use former military, testing how far they're willing to go to save loved ones. But the real goal isn't death. The real goal is emotions. Fear, love, devotion, determination. They broadcast these emotions to a closed network for elite clients who pay millions for the opportunity to feel something genuine." I looked at them, trying to comprehend what was said. "Mr. Shepard," continued the investor, "you passed all physical tests flawlessly, but the real test is ahead, and it will show who you really are." The investor made a sign, and full light came on in the hall. I saw that behind the person tied to the frame stood 4 more in the same hoods. "The final test, Mr. Shepard," said the investor, "the real verification." Craig stepped aside, taking the position of an observer. "You still think this is a test of devotion," continued the investor. "But in reality, we're testing something greater. We're testing if you remained human after everything you experienced in war, after all the killings, all the cruelty." He turned to the 5 hooded figures. "We give you a pistol with 1 bullet," he said, pointing to the weapon in my hand, "and place you before a choice." At that moment the lights dimmed again, not completely this time, but just dimmed, creating a grim, tense atmosphere. After a few seconds, emergency lighting came on, and I saw Craig step forward, removing his jacket and remaining in military uniform underneath. "Shepard," he said, and his voice sounded no longer like a colonel's, but like a man with whom we had gone through hell. "This is the final test, for both of us." I looked at him, not understanding what was happening. "A year ago I faked my death to infiltrate the theater," Craig continued. "They use former special forces in their games, testing them for strength. But the true goal isn't physical tests. The true goal is moral choice." The investor stepped aside, allowing Craig to lead the conversation. "I worked undercover gathering evidence," Craig said. "But over time I realized the task was more complex than it seemed. The theater isn't just a betting pool. It's a cult, a philosophical system. They believe they're creating a new elite, people who have gone through extreme tests and preserved humanity." He came closer to me. "I planned an operation for their liquidation. Everything was ready. And then I learned they had chosen a new target, you and Sophia." "Why us?" I asked, still holding the gun ready. "Because I told them about you," Craig simply replied. "Described you as the perfect candidate, combat experience, psychological resilience, strong attachment to wife. They became interested." "You used us as bait," I stated, not asked. "As an opportunity to deliver a decisive blow," Craig corrected. "To take them all simultaneously. But for this, I needed a reliable person inside." He looked at the 5 hooded figures. "And here we are. The final test, Shepard, for them. a check of your humanity for us, a chance to end the theater once and for all. At that moment, full light came on in the hall, blindingly bright after the semi-darkness. I instinctively covered my eyes with my hand. "The final test," repeated Craig, "a choice that will determine who you really are." In the bright light, I saw assistants simultaneously tear off the hoods from the 5 figures. And I froze, not believing my eyes. Before me stood 5 women, and they all looked exactly like Sophia. The same facial features, the same hair, the same eyes. 5 perfect copies of my wife looked at me with identical expressions of fear and hope. "What the?" I began, but Craig interrupted me. "4 of them are professional doubles in makeup," he explained. "One is the real Sophia. You have 1 bullet, Eric. If you shoot a fake, she dies, an innocent person dies. If you hit the real one, you save 4 lives because your wife is wearing a bulletproof vest and you pass the test." I looked at the 5 identical women, unable to believe in the reality of what was happening. This is madness," I forced out. "This is the final test," said the investor, returning to view. "A test of your ability to recognize a loved one, a test of your readiness to take responsibility for the choice." I slowly approached the first woman. She looked exactly like Sophia, the same green eyes with golden flecks, the same small mole under the right ear that I loved to kiss in the mornings. Even the smell was hers, vanilla and sandalwood. "Eric," she whispered, "please help me." Sophia's voice, Sophia's intonations, even the slight accent left from childhood spent between Europe and America. I moved to the second. Same appearance, same look, but she was silent, just looking at me with pleading in her eyes. The third, the fourth, the fifth, they all looked absolutely identical. Professionals in their field, makeup artists, special effects specialists, had done a perfect job. I slowly circled them, trying to find at least some clue, at least some difference. But there were none, or I couldn't see them. And then realization hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't with certainty determine which of them was the real Sophia, the woman I had lived with for 3 years, the woman whom I thought I knew to the last detail. Years of military missions, psychological training, constant vigilance had damaged my ability to form deep emotional connections. I stopped, lowering the pistol. Inside spread a strange emptiness, not pain, not despair, but emptiness. As if I had finally seen the truth about myself, which I suspected but didn't want to acknowledge. "I won't shoot," I said, addressing Craig. "Not this time." Craig looked at me with an unreadable expression. "You're failing the test, soldier." "No," I replied, and in my voice appeared confidence that I didn't feel a minute ago. "I'm finally passing it." I threw the pistol on the floor. Metal clinked against concrete, the sound echoed through the quieted hall. Now I wasn't circling the women like a prison guard. I approached the first of them, carefully took her face in my palms, intently looked into her eyes. I wasn't looking for external signs. I was looking for what can't be faked: soul. Then moved to the second, to the third. Coming to the fourth, I paused. Without a word, I embraced her and whispered, "Forgive me." I turned to Craig. "Here's my wife. I recognized her not by appearance, but by how she reacts to my touch. This is the only one of them whose heart beats faster when I'm near." In the hall, applause sounded, restrained, almost ironic. Craig nodded. "Congratulations. That's the right answer. The test wasn't to shoot correctly, but to refuse to shoot at all, because there was no bulletproof vest on your wife. If you had recognized her and shot, she would already be dead." I embraced Sophia, feeling her heart beating next to mine. But something was wrong. Her pulse changed, the rhythm became different, more precise, more professional. I looked into her eyes and noticed a strange detail. On her face appeared a barely noticeable cold smile. Not my Sophia's smile. She slowly freed her hand from my embrace, and I saw a miniature pistol appear from the folds of her clothing. The world slowed down, as happens in moments of mortal danger. I saw a finger lay on the trigger, saw the pistol rising. Sophia fired, not at me but at the investor, who at that moment was trying to discreetly retrieve a weapon. The bullet hit him in the shoulder. On his face froze a grimace of pain and surprise. "They forced me," whispered Sophia, still holding the pistol. "6 months ago they found me at an audition and said that either I agree to their game or they'd kill you." Craig gave a signal, and people in tactical gear burst into the hall, special services operatives. They surrounded the investor and his assistants, quickly and professionally handcuffing them. "We've been tracking this organization for 2 years," Craig explained, as operatives bustled around us. "Sophia contacted us when she received their offer. We prepared an operation but needed her to get to the very center of the network. The past 3 months she's been playing a double game." I looked at my wife in confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Couldn't risk it. They monitored our every step," Sophia replied with tears. "Those compromising photographs you found where I'm with a man, they were real but I was drugged. I don't even remember how it happened." Craig put his hand on my shoulder. "She risked her life, Shepard, for you, for justice. This was her test of loyalty, and she passed it." I looked at Sophia, my Sophia, whom, as it turned out, I both knew and didn't know simultaneously. A woman who proved to be stronger and braver than I thought. A woman who went through hell for our love. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Craig smiled, "you will start anew, but this time truly get to know each other." Chapter 4: Revelation. Special forces in black uniforms scattered across the hall, taking positions at each exit. The investor sat on the floor, pressing his palm to his shot shoulder, face distorted with pain, but in his eyes, a strange, almost research interest, as if he were observing the proceedings from outside, analyzing and cataloging reactions. A scientist to the end. Medics examined Sophia's 4 doubles, women who now, next to the real one, no longer seemed so similar. Differences emerged like a photograph in developing solution. One has a slightly different curve of eyebrows, another's expression lines are positioned differently, the third has a different tone of voice, the fourth has a different posture. And how could I not have noticed this before? Sophia stood beside me, still gripping the small pistol, as if reluctant to part with it even now, when the danger had passed. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline which still pulsed in her blood. Craig gave short orders over the radio, then approached us. "The operational part is complete," he said. "The investor and all key figures of the theater have been detained. Currently, synchronous operations are being conducted in 3 more cities." Looking back, I saw the whole situation anew. Each of my decisions, each step, all led to one goal. I was the main figure in their spectacle without even suspecting it. And worst of all, I hadn't recognized my own wife among the doubles. Not immediately. I had to turn to basic instincts, physical reactions, to find her among the copies. What did this say about our relationship? About my ability to truly see another person? I looked at Sophia, and in her eyes I read understanding. She knew what I was thinking. "We need to talk," I said, "in private." We were placed in a safe house outside the city, a modest cottage with enhanced perimeter security and armored glass. A classic refuge for witnesses or participants in special operations. Craig left to coordinate operations in other cities, promising to return within a day with updated information. We were left alone, for the first time in a long time truly alone, without surveillance, without hidden motives, without pretense. It was strange to realize that we could finally speak freely, as if we had both become so accustomed to masks that now we didn't know how to communicate without them. Sophia sat on the couch, hugging her knees, a defensive posture that I knew well. Her eyes were red from tears, but she held herself together as always. "You should know the whole truth," she said finally. I should have told you earlier, but you couldn't, I finished for her. I understand. No, you don't understand, she shook her head. It's not just about the theater, it's about us. I sat opposite, giving her space. What do you mean? Sophia took a deep breath. Eric, you're a wonderful husband, caring, faithful, reliable, but you have never fully opened up to me. There was always this wall, bulletproof glass between us. I could see you but never really touch you. Her words were like a precise shot, straight to a pain point whose existence I hadn't even suspected. Sophia. She stood up, went to the window. Beyond the glass was a green lawn and forest in the distance, a peaceful view contrasting with our conversation. You know what was the scariest? She continued, not turning around. Not the threats, not blackmail, not danger, but the thought that I could lose you and you wouldn't even notice. Would continue living in your fortress, not letting anyone inside. I remained silent, processing her words. They were a painful truth. During my years of service, I learned to wall myself off from the world, keep emotions under control, not allow myself to become too attached. It was a survival strategy in war zones, but I had transferred it to our peaceful life, to our marriage. When I agreed to work with Craig, Sophia continued, it wasn't just for your safety. It was a chance to reach you, to show that I'm stronger than you think, that I can be a partner, not just decoration in your fortress. She finally turned to me, and in her eyes was so much pain and hope simultaneously that it took my breath away. You really couldn't recognize me among those women, she said quietly. It's not your fault, you just never saw me completely. I stood up and slowly approached her, not to embrace or console, just to be closer when I said what I needed to say. You're right, I admitted. All my adult life I learned not to get attached, not to feel too strongly. It was the only way to survive where I was, to see friends die day after day and continue functioning. I paused, choosing words. When I returned and met you, I thought I could just switch, be normal. But the human brain doesn't work that way. I brought the war home, into our bedroom, into our kitchen. Not gunfire and explosions, but walls, invisible barricades. Sophia looked at me, and for the first time in a long time I allowed myself to truly see her. Not just observe or analyze, but see the person before me. I won't shoot, I said, repeating the words spoken in the arena. Not this time, and not the next. I refuse to continue living under siege, Sophia. I want to learn to feel again. She took a step toward me, not for an embrace, just to be closer. It won't be easy, she said, for both of us. I know, I nodded, but I'm ready to try, to really try. She held out her hand, and I took it. A simple gesture, but the beginning of something new. Not a promise of immediate solution to all problems, but rather a vow to work on them together. And at that moment I dropped my weapon for the second time. Not a physical pistol, but the one I always carried inside, constant vigilance, distrust, emotional detachment. This was a moment of real choice, a real test of loyalty, not only to each other but to ourselves. Craig returned the next day as promised. He looked tired but satisfied. The operation had clearly been successful. We got them all, he reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Sophia. The investor, his inner circle, financiers, technical specialists, the entire structure of the theater is destroyed. What will happen to them? I asked. Standard procedure for organizations of this scale, Craig shrugged. Some will go to trial. Some will agree to a deal in exchange for information. Some will simply disappear from the public field. He sipped his coffee, looked at both of us. And what will happen to you? Good question. Sophia and I exchanged glances. We haven't decided yet, she replied. Witness protection program, I suggested, although the very thought was unpleasant. Craig shook his head. I don't think it's necessary. We've captured all key players. Those who remain free won't risk pursuing you, too dangerous to attract attention after such a failure. Then we just return to normal life, Sophia asked with doubt. The definition of normal life is quite subjective, Craig noted with a slight smirk. But yes, I think you can return home, perhaps change the city job, start with a clean slate. Start with a clean slate. This thought seemed simultaneously frightening and attractive. And you, I asked Craig, will you return to service? He pondered for a moment. No, after a year of living undercover, I'm tired. Time to pass the baton to the young. So, retiring. I couldn't imagine Craig in a rocking chair with a fishing rod. Let's call it consulting work, he smiled, without field operations. Craig finished his coffee and placed the cup on the table. You have a week in this house, then you'll need to leave. Where your decision. He headed to the door but stopped at the threshold. And one more thing. Nobody except us three knows that Sophia worked undercover. For everyone else, even for my colleagues, you were ordinary victims of the theater. Better if it stays that way. When the door closed behind him, Sophia and I remained silent for a long time, trying to comprehend everything we had learned. What will we do? She finally asked. I took her hand, no longer just a gesture but a real contact. What we should have done long ago, start anew. The week in the safe house flew by quickly. Sophia and I talked a lot, more than in all 3 years of marriage. We told each other stories that previously seemed insignificant or too painful, filled in the gaps, built bridges across chasms of misunderstanding. Sophia told about her childhood in a diplomatic family, about constant moves, the feeling of homelessness, how acting became a way to adapt to new places and people. I told about the war, not a chronicle of combat operations, but what truly matters, about fear, about friendship on the front line, about moments of humanity amidst chaos. We both cried, we both laughed, we both fell silent when words weren't needed. And gradually, day by day, something changed between us. Not a dramatic transformation from films, but a quiet, deep shift. Like tectonic plates that move imperceptibly but inexorably, creating a new landscape. On the 7th day, Craig returned with the latest news and a packet of documents. New passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, he said, handing over an envelope. All genuine, legal, just under new names. Consider it a thank you from the government for services. And what about our house belongings? Sophia asked. A team has already packed all necessities, Craig replied. The rest will be sold, money transferred to your new account. I took the documents, reviewed them. Michael and Elizabeth Ryan, residents of Oregon, he, a security consultant, she an acting teacher at a local college. Why Oregon? I asked. Quiet place far from both coasts, low crime, good medicine, Craig shrugged. And they always need good teachers. Sophia took her new passport, ran a finger over the photograph. Elizabeth, she pronounced as if tasting the name. I like it. Is this forever? I asked. Or someday will we be able to return to our former names? Depends on you, Craig replied. Legally, nothing prevents you from keeping your old identities, but I would recommend starting with a clean slate. He looked at both of us with an expression I rarely saw on his face, almost paternal care. You've earned a new life, Shepherd, both of you. He extended his hand, and I shook it, firmly in a manly way without unnecessary words. Then he embraced Sophia, which was completely out of character for him. Take care of him, he said to her. He's the best I've served with. I know, she replied simply. Craig nodded, as if completing an important mission, and headed for the door. Colonel, I called after him, thank you. He turned, and a rare smile flashed across his face. It was an honor, Sergeant. When the door closed behind him, I felt a strange relief, as if an important stage of life had concluded, and now we could move forward. Sophia approached me, laid her head on my shoulder. "Ready for a new life, Michael Ryan." I embraced her, for the first time not thinking about possible threats, escape routes, and tactical positions. Just held close the person I loved. "Ready, Elizabeth Ryan." The first 6 months in Oregon were simultaneously the most difficult and most peaceful in my life. We bought a small house on the outskirts of a university town, spacious, with wide windows and a garden. A place open to the world, not a fortress designed to protect against it. Sophia, now Elizabeth, received a position at the local College of Arts, taught acting to students who looked at her with admiration, not suspecting what she had gone through. I opened a small security consulting firm, not a security agency like before, but specifically a consultancy practice, helped local businesses protect data, assessed physical security of buildings, conducted training for personnel. Peaceful work, using my skills, but not associated with violence. We both visited a therapist, individually and as a couple, not because we had serious problems, but because we wanted to avoid them, wanted to learn to talk to each other before misunderstanding turned into an abyss. Sometimes at night, I was still haunted by nightmares, not only about war, but also about the tests of the theater, about the 5 Sophias, about my inability to recognize my own wife. In such moments, she simply held my hand, not trying to console with words, just letting me know she was beside me. She had her own demons too. Sometimes she would wake up screaming, convinced that they had found us, that everything would repeat. On such nights I became the anchor, embraced, didn't let go, reminded that we were safe. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia suddenly turned to me. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. I froze, trying to comprehend these 2 words that changed everything. "When did you find out?" "3 days ago," she replied. "Wanted to be sure before telling you." I looked at her, my wife, with whom we had gone through hell, my wife, whom I was learning to know anew each day, and felt something warm spreading in my chest. Not panic, not fear for the future, but happiness. "Are you glad?" she asked with slight uncertainty. I took her hand, kissed her fingers. "More than I can express in words." She smiled, and in this smile was everything: relief, joy, hope. "Me too," she admitted, and scared at the same time. "Of what?" "That I won't cope, that this world is too cruel for a child, that someday they will return." I understood her fears. They lived in me too. But over the past months, I had learned not to let fears control my decisions. "Elizabeth," I said, using her new name as a reminder of our new life, "we can't promise that everything will be perfect. Nobody can, but we can promise that we'll be there for the child and for each other." She laid her head on my shoulder, and we watched as the last rays of the sun colored the horizon gold. A symbolic moment, the end of one day and the promise of the next. That night I slept without nightmares for the first time in a long time. A year later, on an almost identical summer evening, we again sat on the same porch. Only now between us was a cradle, and in it, our 3-month-old daughter Olivia. A little miracle with Sophia's eyes and my stubborn chin, as my wife joked. Life had found a new rhythm, calm, measured, centered around the tiny being who completely depended on us. Sleepless nights, first smiles, endless fascination with each new gesture or sound. I never thought I was capable of such unconditional love. Never imagined that I would wake up in the middle of the night not from nightmares about the past, but from the desire to simply watch my child breathe. Sophia, I still sometimes called her that in my thoughts, although aloud she had been Elizabeth for more than a year, held our daughter in her arms, softly singing a lullaby. She had blossomed in motherhood, as if finding a role for which she was created. "A letter from Craig came today," she said, not taking her eyes off the child. I nodded. Our former commander wrote rarely but regularly, usually short notes about weather, fishing, ordinary things. Never anything about work, about the past, about the theater. We understood and appreciated this caution. What does he write? Retired for real, Sophia smiled. Bought a cottage by a lake. Invites us to visit when Olivia grows a bit. Old fox, I shook my head. Surely still consulting intelligence agencies from his cottage by the lake. Surely, she agreed. We were silent, enjoying a moment of silence. Then Sophia looked at me with that special gaze that appeared after our daughter's birth, a look full of serene happiness. I was so afraid I had lost you, she said quietly. I thought I had lost myself too, I replied. But now I know for certain this is my heart, and it will always beat faster beside you. She smiled, and I saw in her eyes the reflection of the sunset, golden glimmers, like a promise of many such evenings in the future. We sat on the porch of our home, a former Special Forces operative, an actress playing the most important role in her life, and a little girl who knew nothing about the theater, tests, and secret organizations. I looked at the bump of a scar on my palm, a trace of the burn during the first test, a physical reminder of the past which, strangely, didn't evoke painful memories. Just a scar, part of a story that led us here. Olivia woke up, opened her eyes, a surprisingly meaningful gaze for such a tiny being. Sophia handed me our daughter, and I accepted this priceless burden with the care I had learned over recent months. Tiny fingers wrapped around my index finger with surprising strength. Unconditional trust, unconditional love. I looked at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in copper and gold tones. The day was ending and night was beginning, not frightening, not threatening, but simply another part of the day, part of life. We had passed our test of loyalty, not only to each other but to ourselves. And in this quiet, ordinary moment was a reward, more significant than any medal received in service. I held my future in my arms and knew, whatever happens next, we'll handle it. Together. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.